The roar of the engine was deafening as the rented Jeep tore through the red dirt road, kicking up a cloud of dust that instantly coated my face. Through the haze, I could hear the hysterical laughter of two grown men. My husband Dante leaned out of the driver's side window, his face twisted in a cruel grin. "Let us see how long it takes for you to walk back to the hotel, Aaliyah. Consider this a lesson for killing the vibe." His best friend Kyle sat in the passenger seat howling like a hyena and raising a beer bottle in a mock toast as they sped away. They were driving off with my purse, my phone, and my passport. I stood there alone in the middle of a rice paddy in rural Vietnam. The humidity was thick enough to chew on. The silence of the countryside rushed back in, broken only by the distant sound of a water buffalo. Most women in my position would have collapsed. Most women would have screamed or chased after the car in a panic. I did neither. I simply looked down at my linen trousers, dusted a speck of red dirt off my thigh, and smirked. Dante thought leaving me stranded in a foreign country without money was a hilarious prank. He thought he was teaching his boring, uptight wife a lesson in humility. But my husband forgot one tiny detail. Before I was his quiet administrative assistant, I spent 3 years managing supply chains right here in Southeast Asia. This was not his playground, it was mine. He did not know that when he turned that car around 30 days later to find me, he would not just be losing his wife, he would be losing his entire company. My name is Aaliyah, and I am 29 years old. For 5 years, I played the role of the supportive shadow fixing Dante's mistakes while he took the credit. I let his family disrespect me. I let his friends mock me. But standing on that dirt road, the old Aaliyah died. Before I tell you how I turned his cruel joke into the most satisfying revenge in corporate history, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And if you have ever been the smartest person in the room but were treated like the help, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. You are going to want to see how this ends. The nightmare truly began just 1 hour before they left me there. We were sitting in a riverside restaurant in Hoi An, surrounded by yellow lanterns and tourists. It was supposed to be a business trip to secure a silk manufacturer for Dante's clothing line, but as usual, Dante and Kyle were more interested in the cheap beer than the contracts. I sat across from them, clutching the file folder that contained the research I had spent weeks preparing. Kyle, a man who has lived on his parents' trust fund since birth, looked at me with that familiar sneer he reserved specifically for me. He nudged Dante and laughed. "Why did you bring the buzzkill, Dante? She is looking at that menu like it is a math test. Just relax, Aaliyah. You are in paradise. Try to act like you belong here." The air inside the Bamboo River restaurant was thick with the scent of lemongrass grilled pork and the overpowering cologne my husband Dante had bathed in that morning. We were sitting at the best table in the house overlooking the lantern-lit water of Hoi An, but the atmosphere at our table was anything but peaceful. Dante was holding court, his voice booming over the quiet conversations of the other diners. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand and a fabric swatch in the other, waving it around like a flag of victory. "I cannot believe we pulled this off," Dante shouted, slapping the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. "To the Emperor Collection. This silk is going to change everything. We are getting it for $3 a yard, Kyle. $3. Do you know what Marketous sells this for back in Atlanta 80? The margins are going to be insane." Kyle, his best friend and unofficial advisor on all things terrible, leaned back in his wicker chair and grinned. He was sweating through his linen shirt, his face flushed from the humidity and the 4 beers he had already consumed. "You are a genius, D," Kyle said, clinking his beer bottle against Dante's whiskey glass. "This is why you are the CEO. You come to the source. You cut out the middleman. Those corporate idiots back home are going to weep when they see these numbers." Jessica, Kyle's wife, sat next to him, fanning herself dramatically with a menu. She was wearing a white dress that cost more than the annual salary of the waitstaff serving us. She looked at me across the table, her eyes scanning my simple beige blouse and trousers with that familiar look of pity mixed with disdain. I sat silently, my hands folded in my lap. My eyes were not on the celebration. They were fixed on the contract, lying in the center of the table. It was a single page, poorly translated, with the letterhead of a company called Golden Dragon Enterprises. I had spent the last 2 hours analyzing that document while the men drank. I had noticed the inconsistencies. I had noticed that the business address listed was a residential apartment block in Ho Chi Minh City, not a factory in Da Nang as they claimed. I had noticed the clause about non-refundable deposits via wire transfer to a personal account in the Cayman Islands. It was a classic procurement scam, one I had seen a dozen times when I worked in logistics. "Dante," I said softly. He ignored me, pouring more whiskey into his glass. "Dante," I repeated, my voice slightly firmer. He stopped mid-laugh and looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "What is it, Aaliyah? Can't you see we are celebrating? Don't start with the mood killing." I took a breath. "I am not trying to kill the mood. I am trying to save you $50,000. Look at the contract again. The supplier code is missing, and the fiber content is listed as synthetic blend in the Vietnamese fine print, but silk in the English section." I reached out to tap the paper, but Kyle snatched it away before I could touch it. He looked at the paper, then looked at me, then burst out laughing. "Oh, here we go," Kyle sneered, shaking his head. "The secretary has an opinion." "It is not an opinion, Kyle," I said, keeping my voice steady, despite the heat rising in my cheeks. "I speak enough Vietnamese to read the fine print. Lua non tao means artificial silk. It is polyester, Dante. You are about to spend $50,000 on plastic sheets." Dante looked at me, a flicker of doubt crossing his face for a second. He looked at the swatch in his hand. Kyle saw Dante waver and immediately jumped in to crush it. "Dante, come on," Kyle said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Are you going to listen to her? She answers phones, bro. She books your flights. Since when is she a textile expert? The guy we met, Mr. Tran, he drove a Mercedes. Scammers do not drive Mercedes. He drives a rental," I countered. "I saw the sticker on the windshield." "Stop it," Aaliyah, Dante snapped. His voice was sharp, cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant. "You are embarrassing me." "I am trying to help you," I insisted. "If you sign that wire transfer tomorrow, the money is gone." Kyle leaned forward, his face invading my personal space. The alcohol on his breath was pungent. "Listen, sweetie," Kyle said, using that tone men use when they talk to toddlers or pets. "We get it. You want to feel involved. You want to feel important. But let the men handle the business, okay? You just worry about whatever it is you do, keeping Dante's schedule organized. Leave the big boy decisions to the CEOs. I felt a knot of rage tighten in my stomach. I wanted to scream that I was the one who built Dante's inventory system. I wanted to scream that the only reason his company had not gone bankrupt last year was because I renegotiated his shipping rates. But I knew it wouldn't matter. To them, I was just the background noise. Jessica chimed in, then her voice sickly sweet. "Oh, leave her alone, Kyle." Jessica giggled, swirling the ice in her drink. "She is probably just grumpy because of the heat. You know how the sun gets to her." She looked at me, her blue eyes wide with fake concern. "Maybe you should have worn a hat," Aaliyah, Jessica continued. "You are looking a little dark. We wouldn't want you to blend in with the locals too much, would we?" The table went silent for a beat. The insult hung in the air, heavy and humid. It was a microaggression so sharp it felt like a paper cut. She was reminding me of my place. Reminding me that in her world and in the world, my husband was desperately trying to belong to my blackness, was a flaw, something to be managed and minimized. Dante did not defend me. He did not tell her to shut up. He just chuckled nervously, terrified of offending his rich white friends. "You guys are too much," Dante said, signaling the waiter for the check. He turned to me, his face hard. "Drop it, Aaliyah. I am signing the deal tomorrow. And if you say one more word about polyester or rental cars, you are going to wait in the hotel room for the rest of the trip. Do you understand?" I looked at my husband. I looked at the man I had vowed to love and cherish. And I realized in that moment that he did not just disrespect me. He despised me. He despised my intelligence because it made him feel small. The waiter arrived with a bottle of champagne, a gift from the house for the big spenders. Dante popped the cork, the foam spilling over onto the table. He poured 4 glasses. "To the deal," Dante announced, raising his glass, "to the Dragon Gold partnership, and to making millions." Kyle raised his glass. Jessica raised hers. I sat there, my hands still folded. I did not move. Aaliyah, Dante said through gritted teeth, "Pick up the glass." "No," I said. "Excuse me," I said. "No, Dante. I will not toast to you getting scammed, and I will not toast with people who disrespect me." The silence at the table was deafening this time. Kyle lowered his glass, his eyes widening in mock shock. "Ooh, Dante," Kyle whispered loudly. "Trouble in paradise. Looks like the little woman is off the leash." Dante's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. The veins in his neck bulged. He slammed his glass down, shattering the stem. The sound echoed through the restaurant, causing heads to turn. "Get up," Dante hissed. "What I asked. I said get up." He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. "We are leaving, now." He threw a stack of cash onto the table, barely counting it. "Come on, Kyle. Jessica, we are going." We walked out of the restaurant in a tense procession. Dante dragged me by the arm, walking so fast I nearly stumbled in my sandals. Kyle and Jessica followed, snickering to each other like schoolchildren watching a fight in the playground. When we reached the rented Jeep parked on the edge of the dirt road, Dante shoved me into the back seat. He didn't get in the driver's seat immediately. He stood outside with Kyle, whispering furiously. I saw Kyle gesturing toward the dark, empty road that led back to the resort. I saw them look at me, then look at the road, then look at each other, and laugh. It was a cruel, malicious laugh. Dante climbed into the driver's seat. Kyle hopped in the front passenger side. Jessica squeezed in next to me in the back, inching away as if my defiance was contagious. "You need a timeout, Aaliyah," Dante said, starting the engine. His voice was calm now. Terrifyingly calm. "You think you are so smart? You think you know better than me?" I stayed silent. "You need to learn some respect," Dante continued, revving the engine. "You need to remember who pays for your life, who took you out of that tiny apartment in Queens and gave you a world." He drove fast, not toward the hotel, but away from it. He turned onto a bumpy, unlit road surrounded by rice paddies. The city lights faded behind us. "Where are we going, Dante?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. He just drove for 20 minutes into the pitch-black darkness of the countryside. Then he slammed on the brakes. "Get out," Dante said. I looked around. There was nothing but darkness and the sound of insects. I said, "Get out," he screamed, turning around to face me. "You want to act like a child? I will treat you like a child. Get out and think about your attitude. You can walk back. Maybe the walk will clear your head." Jessica opened the door next to me and practically pushed me out. I stumbled onto the red dirt, the humidity hitting me like a wall. Dante leaned out the window. His face was twisted in that cruel grin, the one that would haunt him for the rest of his life, though he didn't know it yet. "Don't worry, honey," he mocked. "It is only about 10 miles. Use that big brain of yours to navigate." Kyle laughed, raising his beer bottle. "See you at the finish line, secretary?" And then he hit the gas. The Jeep tore away, leaving me in the dust. I watched the taillights disappear, leaving me in absolute darkness. I stood there feeling for my phone in my pocket, only to realize I had left my purse on the floorboard of the car. They had taken everything. My money, my passport, my phone. But as the silence of the Vietnamese countryside settled around me, I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. The hot wind blew across the fields, drying the sweat on my forehead. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the heavy night air. Dante had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He thought he had stranded a helpless housewife. He didn't realize he had just unchained a CEO. I looked up at the stars, identical to the ones I used to look at when I worked late shifts at the port in Haiphong 3 years ago. I turned my back on the direction the car had gone. I didn't start walking toward the hotel. I started walking toward the village lights flickering in the distance. Let the game begin. Dante. The red taillights of the Jeep bobbed in the distance like dying embers before vanishing completely around a bend in the road. The roar of the engine faded, replaced instantly by the overwhelming symphony of the Vietnamese countryside. Crickets chirped in a deafening rhythm. Frogs croaked from the muddy water of the rice paddies. The air was heavy, smelling of wet earth, burning straw, and the faint, sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence wash over me. A typical American wife would be hyperventilating right now. She would be imagining tigers in the grass or bandits in the shadows. She would be crying over her ruined makeup and her husband's betrayal. But I just felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't have to listen to Dante's voice. I didn't have to fake a smile at Kyle's racist jokes. I didn't have to shrink myself to fit into their tiny, fragile egos. I looked down at my feet. My sandals were coated in red dust. I kicked them against the asphalt, knocking off the worst of the dirt. Then I turned my back on the direction they had gone. I knew exactly where I was. About 200 yards back, I had seen the flickering light of a single bulb hanging from a corrugated tin roof. I began to walk. My stride was long and purposeful. The humidity made my shirt stick to my back, a sensation that triggered a flood of memories I had buried deep down to become Mrs. Dante Williams. This heat wasn't an enemy, it was an old friend. It reminded me of 3 years ago before I met Dante, when I wasn't just a trophy wife. Back then, I was Aaliyah the Fixer. I was the supply chain manager for a global logistics firm based in Ho Chi Minh City. I had spent 2 years navigating these roads on a Honda Wave motorbike, negotiating deals in back rooms, filled with cigarette smoke, and learning that in this country respect is the only currency that matters. Dante didn't know that version of me. He only knew the quiet girl he met at a charity gala in Atlanta. He never asked about my past. He just assumed that, like him, I had never stepped foot outside a resort. He assumed my world began the day I met him. I reached the source of the light. It was a small roadside shack, a quoncock with low plastic stools scattered on the dirt floor. An old man in a faded tank top was wiping down a table with a gray rag. A small television in the corner was playing a soap opera. The smell of strong Robusta coffee and condensed milk drifted through the air. The old man looked up as I approached. He saw a black woman in expensive American clothes walking out of the darkness. His eyes widened in surprise, and he opened his mouth to speak, likely searching for the few English words he knew to tell me he was closed. Shin Loi Chu. I said, my voice smooth and controlled. Chao bi lo se, chao ko the muon dien twai kuchu mot lat duok kong. The words rolled off my tongue with the precise northern accent I had spent thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours perfecting with a private tutor. I saw the shock register on his face. It wasn't just that I spoke Vietnamese, it was that I spoke it with the cadence of a local using the proper honorifics. He froze the rag hovering over the table. "You speak Vietnamese?" he asked in his own language, disbelief coloring his tone. "I lived here for 2 years," I replied, stepping under the shelter of the tin roof. "My husband, he is not very smart. He left me down the road." The old man's face softened instantly. "In this culture, leaving a woman alone on the road is not a prank. It is a disgrace." He clicked his tongue and shook his head, muttering about stupid tourists. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old battered smartphone. "Call," he said, handing it to me with 2 hands, a sign of respect. "Call your husband. I will tell him to come back." I took the phone, feeling the warmth of the device in my palm. "Thank you, Uncle," I said, "but I am not calling my husband. I didn't need Dante to come back. I didn't want him to come back. Not yet." I dialed a number from memory. It was a number I hadn't called in 24 months, but one that was burned into my brain like a social security number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I held my breath. It was late, almost 10 at night, but I knew she never slept. I knew that the woman on the other end of this line did her best business when the rest of the world was dreaming. "Allo?" a sharp, raspy voice answered. It was a voice that could cut glass. "Madame Nguyen," I said, switching back to English, knowing she preferred it for business. "It is Aaliyah." There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy silence, then a short, dry chuckle. "The ghost," Madame Nguyen said. "I thought you died and went to American heaven. I heard you married some loud boy who sells T-shirts." "He calls it a fashion empire, madame," I said, leaning against the wooden post of the shack. "Empire?" she scoffed. "I saw him today. He came to the fake factory, the one run by the scammers in District 4. He walked around like a peacock. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost." "You saw him?" I asked, a small smile playing on my lips. "I see everything, Aaliyah. You know this? I was waiting for you to walk in the door. I had the real contract ready, the silk from the Bowlock Highlands, the grade A mulberry, but you never came in. I saw you sitting in the car while he went inside to shake hands with thieves. Why didn't you come in? I closed my eyes. Why hadn't I? Because I was trying to be a good wife, because I was trying not to bruise his fragile masculinity. He didn't want my help, madame, I said quietly. He told me to sit in the car. He said business was for men. The old woman on the phone made a sound of disgust. And where is this big man now? He is on his way back to the resort, I said, watching a gecko scurry across the ceiling. He and his friends thought it would be funny to leave me on the side of the road in the rice fields. They took my passport. They took my wallet. They think I am helpless. The silence on the other end was different this time. It wasn't thoughtful. It was dangerous. Madame Nguyen was not a woman who tolerated disrespect. She was 70 years old, survived a war, and built a textile monopoly from a single sewing machine. To her, loyalty was everything, and Dante had just proven he had none. He left you, she asked, her voice dropping an octave. Yes. So, Aaliyah, she said, the business tone returning sharper than a knife. Why are you calling me? Do you want a ride? Do you want me to send my boys to stop his car and break his legs? Because I can do that. It would be my pleasure. No legs, madame, I said, my eyes opening to stare into the dark void of the fields. That is too easy. He needs to walk. But he needs to walk into a trap. I took a deep breath. The smell of the rain was grounding me. You still have that shipment, I asked. The 5,000 yards of raw silk, the one he was supposed to buy. It is sitting in the warehouse, she confirmed. Waiting for a buyer with a brain. I am the buyer, I said. You have no money, Aaliyah. You just said he took your wallet. I don't need a wallet, I said, my voice hardening. I have the Cayman accounts, the ones I set up for him. The ones only I have the secondary biometric access to. He thinks he runs the company, but he never read the incorporation papers I drafted. I am not just the wife, madame. I am the silent partner. I own 51% of the holding company. I could hear the smile in her voice through the phone. It was a terrifying sound. So what is the order, she asked. I gripped the phone tighter. Madame Nguyen, my husband, just canceled his contract with me by throwing me on the street. I want to activate Plan B. Plan B, she asked. The scorched earth. No, I said. Scorched earth is too messy. I want the Emperor's new clothes package. Let him think he bought the silk. Let him think he won. Send the scammers the confirmation. Let him wire them the money. But for the actual shipment, for the product that goes to America, I want you to handle the logistics personally. And what am I shipping? She asked. I looked at the dirt on my feet. Waste, I said. Scraps. The stuff you sweep off the factory floor, but wrap it in gold packaging. Make it look beautiful on the outside, just like him. There was a beat of silence, and then Madame Nguyen laughed. It was a loud, cackling laugh that made the shop owner look up from his cleaning. I missed you, Aaliyah, she said. Welcome home. I hung up the phone and handed it back to the old man. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the only thing Dante hadn't taken, a diamond earring I had quietly unhooked while we were arguing in the car. It was worth $5,000. Thank you for the phone, I said in Vietnamese, placing the diamond on the plastic table. Can I buy a coffee and maybe a ride to the city? The old man looked at the diamond, then at me. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded, swept the diamond into his pocket, and went to the back to brew the strongest coffee of his life. I sat down on the plastic stool and waited. The game had changed. Dante thought he had left a pawn on the board. He didn't realize the pawn had just crowned herself queen. While I was sitting on a plastic stool drinking the best coffee of my life and plotting the dismantling of an empire, my husband and his friends were busy celebrating what they thought was a victory. They drove that Jeep back to the 5-star resort, laughing the entire way. I know this because Kyle posted a video on his Instagram story. It showed Dante leaning back in the passenger seat, wind in his hair, with a caption that read, "Taking out the trash." They thought they had just discarded a burden. They had no idea they had just discarded their lifeline. They arrived back at the resort in high spirits. It was a sprawling, opulent place where the rooms cost more per night than most families earn in a month. They walked through the marble lobby, loud and obnoxious, still high on the adrenaline of their cruelty. They went straight to the bar. Dante ordered a round of their most expensive scotch. He was the big man on campus, the CEO who had just secured a killer deal on silk and put his nagging wife in her place. I can only imagine the conversation that took place that night. Kyle telling Dante that he did the right thing. Jessica chiming in saying that I needed to be taken down a peg, that I had been acting too uppity for someone who used to answer phones. They probably bet money on when I would walk through those doors. 1 hour, 2 hours, before midnight. They expected me to come back crying. They expected me to be covered in mud, begging for forgiveness, grateful that they allowed me back into their circle. They prepared their speeches. Dante probably rehearsed how he would look at me with disappointment and say, "I hope you learned your lesson, Aaliyah." But midnight came and went. The lobby remained empty. The scotch bottles emptied, and the bravado started to thin out, just a little replaced by the haze of intoxication. "She is probably sleeping in the lobby," Dante must have said, slurring his words. "She is too embarrassed to come up. Let her sleep on the couch. It builds character." They went to bed in their air-conditioned suites with Egyptian cotton sheets. I slept on a cot in the back of Madame Nguyen's warehouse, listening to the rain hit the tin roof. And I slept better than I had in years. The sun rose on the first day. Dante woke up with a headache and a dry mouth. He rolled over expecting to see me. He expected to see a glass of water and aspirin on the nightstand because that is what I did. I anticipated his needs. I smoothed over his hangovers, but the nightstand was empty. The other side of his bed was untouched. He checked his phone. No missed calls, no texts, not a single plea for help. This must have annoyed him. To a narcissist, silence is worse than screaming. Screaming means they still have power over you. Silence means you have ceased to exist in their world. He probably threw his phone onto the mattress and stormed into the shower, telling himself that I was just playing a game, that I was trying to make him worry. He went down to breakfast to meet Kyle and Jessica. They sat by the infinity pool ordering elaborate platters of fruit and pastries. Still, no sign of her. Kyle asked, biting into a croissant. "She is sulking," Dante replied, putting on his sunglasses to hide his bloodshot eyes. "She is probably walking around the town trying to make me feel guilty. I am not calling her. If I call her, she wins." "Stay strong, bro," Kyle said. "This is a battle of wills. You break now, and you will be answering to her for the rest of your life. You have to break the horse to ride it." That was their philosophy. I was livestock to them, something to be broken and tamed. They spent the entire day by the pool. They ordered massages. They ordered cocktails. They racked up a bill that would make a normal person faint. They were spending money they thought they had. They were spending the profits from the silk deal that I had already sabotaged. Day 2 arrived. The novelty of the prank was wearing off. The annoyance was turning into a low-grade anxiety, not because they were worried about my safety, but because Dante couldn't find his socks. He couldn't find his favorite watch. He didn't know how to ask the concierge for a reservation because he didn't know the name of the restaurant we were supposed to go to. I held all that information. I was the external hard drive for his entire life. "Where is she?" Dante snapped at lunch. "This isn't funny anymore." "Maybe she went to the police?" Jessica suggested, her voice trembling slightly. "And say what Dante scoffed, that I left her on a road. It is a domestic dispute. The police here don't care. Besides, she doesn't have her passport. She can't go anywhere. She is stuck in this town." He was right about one thing. I was in town, but I wasn't stuck. I was moving pieces on a chessboard he didn't even know existed. The reality check arrived at 7:00 p.m. on the second day. It didn't come in the form of a police officer or a lawyer. It came in the form of a waiter holding a small black credit card terminal. They had just finished a lavish dinner of lobster and imported Wagyu beef. The bill was astronomical. Dante, wanting to look like the provider, waved the waiter over with a flourish. "Put it on the corporate card," Dante said, handing over the heavy black American Express card that bore the company name, the card that made him feel like a king. The waiter took it, bowed, and inserted it into the machine. Processing. Processing. Beep. The waiter frowned. He pulled the card out, wiped the chip on his apron, and inserted it again. Processing. Beep. "I am sorry, sir." The waiter said, his voice polite but firm. "The card has been declined." Dante laughed, a nervous, incredulous laugh. That is impossible. That is a black card. It has no limit. Run it again. The waiter ran it again. Declined. Kyle chimed in. Just use the other one, D. The bank probably put a travel hold on it. You know how they are. Dante pulled out his personal Visa. Declined. He pulled out his MasterCard. Declined. The air at the table grew cold. The humidity of Vietnam seemed to vanish, replaced by a chill that ran straight down Dante's spine. People at nearby tables were starting to look. The waiter was no longer bowing. He was tapping his foot. There must be a mistake, Dante stammered. He pulled out his phone. I will transfer funds right now. I will move money from the main operating account. He opened the banking app for our company, the company that I built. The company where he was listed as CEO, but where I was listed as the primary administrator. He tapped the icon. The login screen appeared. Enter password. He typed in the password he used for everything. His date of birth followed by Empire. Incorrect password. He frowned. He typed it again slower this time. Incorrect password. Access denied. He tried to reset it. The app prompted him to reset your password. Please scan the administrator's fingerprint or provide the two-factor authentication code sent to the number ending in 8892. 1. My number. The phone that was currently turned off and sitting in a drawer in Madame Nguyen's safe house. 2. Dante stared at the screen. The color drained from his face, leaving him a pale, sweaty mess. He realized in that terrifying heartbeat that he didn't actually own anything. He didn't control the money. He didn't control the accounts. He didn't even know the answers to the security questions. Kyle Dante whispered, his voice cracking. Pay the bill. What Kyle asked, laughing nervously. Pay the bill, Kyle. My accounts are locked. Aaliyah. She changed the passwords. She locked me out. Kyle stopped laughing. He reached for his wallet slowly, the reality of the situation dawning on him. The bill was over $800. Kyle, the trust fund baby who famously never picked up a check, had to hand over his card with a grimace. Back in the hotel room, the panic truly set in. Dante spent the next 4 hours trying to break into his own financial life. He called the bank in America. I am sorry, Mr. Williams, the customer service representative said, but you are listed as an authorized user, not the primary account holder. We cannot reset the security protocols without the primary's verbal consent and biometric verification. But I am the CEO. Dante screamed at the phone, pacing around the room like a trapped animal. It is my company! According to our records, the company is owned by a holding trust, the representative replied calmly. And the trustee is Aaliyah Williams. Is she available to speak? Dante threw the phone against the wall. It cracked, just like his ego. He turned to Kyle, who was sitting on the bed looking much less arrogant than he had 2 days ago. She trapped me, Dante whispered. She planned this. She knew. She is just a secretary, Kyle said, trying to maintain his bravado but failing. She is bluffing. She is trying to scare you. No, Dante said, sinking onto the floor, his head in his hands. You don't understand. She handles everything. The payroll, the vendors, the rent. If I can't get into those accounts, the company stops. The launch next week. We can't pay for the venue. We can't pay for the catering. And then the second realization hit him. A realization that was far more personal and immediate than the company. Kyle Dante said, looking up with wide, terrified eyes. What, I don't have any cash. She handled the exchange. I don't have a credit card that works. So Kyle shrugged. I will spot you for a few days until we find her. Dante shook his head. You don't get it. The hotel bill, the flight home. The flight was booked on her card. If she cancels it. He scrambled over to the broken phone, desperate to check the airline app. He managed to get the screen to light up. He pulled up the reservation for their return trip to Atlanta. Canceled. Reason cardholder request. Refund status. Processed to original form of payment. Dante Williams, the man who thought he was a god among men, was stranded in a foreign country with $0 to his name, no way home, and a hotel bill accumulating by the hour that he couldn't pay. He wasn't the prankster anymore. He was the punchline. He sat on the floor of that luxury suite, surrounded by the remnants of his gluttony, and for the first time in his life, he felt true fear. He realized that the woman he had called boring, the woman he had called a buzzkill, the woman he had left in a rice paddy was the only reason he had ever been able to stand tall. And now she had kicked the legs out from under him. He looked at Kyle. Kyle looked away. The friendship was easy when the champagne was flowing, but now that the bill was due, Kyle's loyalty was evaporating as quickly as the condensation on their warm beers. "We need to find her," Dante said, his voice trembling. "We need to find her and beg." Good luck with that, I thought, as I watched the notification of his canceled flight pop up on my burner phone. I took another sip of my coffee. I wasn't lost. I wasn't missing. I was just waiting for him to realize that without me, he was nothing. The hunt was about to begin, but this time, he wasn't the hunter. He was the prey. 30 days is a long time for a narcissist to sit in silence. For Dante, it must have felt like an eternity in hell. During those 4 weeks while I was busy restructuring my portfolio and reconnecting with my network in Southeast Asia, my husband was living a very different reality. He had been kicked out of our luxury suite in Vietnam 3 days after he abandoned me. He had to call Kyle's father to beg for a plane ticket home because Kyle's credit limit wasn't high enough to cover international emergency flights for 2 grown men. Back in Atlanta, Dante was homeless. I had changed the locks on our house. I had alerted the security at our gated community that he was no longer a resident. He was forced to sleep on the pull-out couch in Kyle's basement, surrounded by damp boxes and the smell of cat litter. He had no car because the lease was in my name, and I had reported it stolen the moment I landed in Bangkok. He had no cash because I had frozen the supplementary cards. He was a king without a castle, stripped of his crown and his robes, reduced to borrowing $20 from his best friend just to buy lunch. But Dante is a man driven by ego, not logic. Instead of feeling remorse, he felt rage. He spent those 30 days obsessively checking my social media. He refreshed my Instagram feed every hour, hoping to see a post of me crying or begging for help or looking miserable. He wanted proof that I was suffering without him, but he found nothing. My profile was a ghost town. No stories, no posts, no location tags. I had vanished. It wasn't until late on a Tuesday night that he found me. He wasn't looking at my page. He was hate-scrolling through the Explore page of a prominent Asian venture capitalist named Mr. Tuan, a man Dante had tried and failed to get a meeting with for 2 years. And there in the background of a photo captioned "Celebrating New Strategic Partnerships in Bangkok" was a familiar figure. It was blurry, but there was no mistaking the profile. It was me. But it wasn't the Aaliyah he knew. I wasn't standing in the corner holding a purse. I was sitting at the head of the table holding a glass of vintage wine, laughing with the kind of freedom he had never seen in me. I can only imagine the scream he let out in Kyle's basement. I can imagine him waking up Kyle and Jessica, shoving the phone in their faces, shouting that he had found me. He didn't see a successful woman in that photo. He saw a runaway property. He saw his wife disrespecting him by daring to be happy. He borrowed money from Kyle again. This time Kyle was reluctant. The charm had worn off. Kyle was starting to realize that Dante wasn't a temporarily embarrassed millionaire, but a liability. But Dante is persuasive. He probably spun a story about how he was going to fly to Bangkok, drag me back home, force me to unlock the accounts, and then everything would go back to normal. He probably promised Kyle double the money back. So Dante Williams, the man who used to fly exclusively first class, boarded a crowded economy flight to Thailand. He sat in the middle seat for 22 hours, his knees pressed against the tray table, sandwiched between a crying baby and a backpacker who hadn't showered in days. He stewed in his anger. He rehearsed his lines. He was going to play the worried husband. He was going to storm in and say he had been frantic. He was going to gaslight me into believing that I was the one who had run away, that I was the one who had abandoned him. He convinced himself that as soon as I saw him, I would crumble. I would remember that I was just a secretary, and he was the CEO. He landed in Bangkok, disheveled, exhausted, and smelling of stale airplane air. He didn't shower. He didn't change his wrinkled shirt. He took a taxi straight to the location tagged in the photo. The Moon Bar at the Banyan Tree Hotel is one of the most exclusive rooftop bars in the world. It sits 61 stories above the city, a glowing island in the sky that looks down on the chaos of Bangkok. To get up there, you have to pass through a lobby that smells of orchids and money. You have to take an elevator that makes your ears pop. You have to look like you belong. Dante did not look like he belonged. I was sitting at the VIP corner table, the one with the panoramic view of the Chao Phraya River. The sun had just set, and the city lights were glittering below us like a carpet of diamonds. The humidity was high, but up here the breeze was cool. I was not wearing the beige office clothes Dante preferred. I was wearing a custom-made silk jumpsuit in a deep regal emerald green. It was cut to perfection, highlighting curves that I usually hid under oversized blazers. My hair, which Dante always insisted I straighten to look more professional, was worn in its natural glory, styled in an intricate updo that exposed my neck and shoulders. I wore gold statement earrings that caught the light every time I moved. I was not alone. To my right sat Mr. Tuan, the venture capitalist. To my left was the heir to a shipping conglomerate. Across from me was a European textile heiress. These were people who moved markets with a phone call. And they were all listening to me. I was in the middle of explaining the supply chain logistics for a new sustainable fabric line. I was speaking with my hands confident and animated. Mr. Tuan was nodding, taking notes on his tablet. The heiress was looking at me with genuine admiration. And then I felt a shift in the air. It wasn't a sound, it was a disturbance. The kind you feel when a predator enters a sanctuary. I looked up toward the entrance of the bar. Dante was standing there arguing with the hostess. He looked small. In Atlanta, in his own bubble, he took up so much space. He was loud, he was broad, he was imposing. But here against the backdrop of the skyline surrounded by people who had built real generational wealth, he looked like a child playing dress-up in his father's suit. His linen shirt was stained with sweat. His eyes were wild and bloodshot. He was pointing his finger at the hostess, trying to bully his way past her. I watched him for a moment, savoring the image. This was the man who had told me I was nothing without him. This was the man who had laughed as he drove away in a jeep. Now he was the one on the outside looking in. He spotted me. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second I saw confusion. He didn't recognize me. He was looking for the cowering wife who asked for permission to buy groceries. Instead, he saw a queen holding court. The confusion was quickly replaced by that familiar toxic entitlement. He pushed past the hostess, ignoring her protests. He marched across the rooftop deck, his heavy footsteps out of sync with the lounge music. He was coming to claim his possession. He thought he was walking toward a confrontation. He thought he was about to make a scene that would shame me into submission. He thought he was the hero of this story, finally catching the villain. But as he got closer, I didn't flinch. I didn't stand up. I didn't look away. I simply picked up my wine glass, took a slow, deliberate sip, and waited. The investors at the table stopped talking. They sensed the intrusion. Mr. Tuan looked up, his expression hardening. The shipping heir adjusted his cufflinks, his eyes narrowing at the disheveled man approaching us. Dante reached the table. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. He looked at the investors, then he looked at me. He opened his mouth to shout, to launch into the tirade he had practiced on the plane. He wanted to yell about how worried he was, about how I was crazy. Aaliyah, he choked out, his voice cracking. I looked at him. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I looked at him with the same indifference one might have for a stranger who has walked into the wrong room. I turned to Mr. Tuan. I am sorry, Mr. Tuan. I said, my voice smooth and calm. It appears my former administrative assistant has tracked me down. He has always been a bit obsessed with my schedule. Mr. Tuan looked at Dante, then back at me. He didn't ask questions. He understood power dynamics. Shall I call security? Mr. Tuan asked. Dante's jaw dropped. The wind was knocked out of his sails before he could even raise them. Administrative assistant security. Aaliyah, what the hell are you talking about? Dante stammered, his volume rising. I am your husband. I turned my gaze back to Dante. It was a gaze so cold it could have frozen the humidity in the air. Husband. I asked, raising an eyebrow. My husband is a successful CEO who is currently in Atlanta preparing for a product launch. You look like a backpacker who got lost on the way to the hostel. Dante looked down at his wrinkled clothes. He looked around at the pristine elegance of the rooftop. He realized with a sinking feeling in his gut that he had brought a knife to a nuclear war. He had flown 10,000 miles to scream at me, but standing in front of me now, he couldn't even find his voice. He wasn't angry anymore. He was terrified, because for the first time he saw me. He didn't see the woman who did his laundry. He saw the woman who could end him, and she looked magnificent. The tension at the VIP table was thick enough to choke on. Mr. Tuan was looking at Dante with the kind of disdain usually reserved for a cockroach on a wedding cake. The shipping heir was signaling for security with a subtle raise of his finger, but I did not want Dante dragged away. Not yet. A public scene would only make me look like a woman with a messy personal life, and in the world of high finance mess is a liability. I needed to handle this surgically. I placed a calming hand on Mr. Tuan's arm. "Give us a moment, gentlemen," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "I need to clear up a small misunderstanding with the help." I stood up. I didn't rush. I smoothed the fabric of my emerald jumpsuit, picked up my clutch, and walked toward a secluded corner of the rooftop terrace, away from the prying eyes of the Bangkok elite. I didn't look back to see if Dante was following. I knew he was. He was like a dog on a leash, pulled by his own desperate need for control. We reached the glass railing. The wind was stronger here, whipping my hair around my face. Below us, the city was a grid of golden light, oblivious to the small, petty man standing behind me. I turned to face him. Dante was vibrating with rage. Now that the audience was gone, the mask slipped completely. He grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging into my skin. I looked down at his hand, then up at his eyes. I didn't pull away. I just stared at the contact point until he felt the awkwardness and released me. "Are you insane?" Dante hissed. He was trying to keep his voice down, but the veins in his neck were bulging. "I have been looking for you for a month." "A month, Aaliyah. Do you have any idea what you have put me through?" I said nothing. I just let him speak. I wanted to hear the full extent of his delusion. "You are having a mental breakdown, aren't you?" Dante continued, running a hand through his greasy hair. "That is what this is. You're having a midlife crisis at 29. Look at you. You are wearing a costume. You are drinking wine with strangers. You are pretending to be some kind of big shot. It is pathetic." He paused, waiting for me to defend myself. When I didn't, he switched tactics. He moved closer, his voice dropping to that sickly sweet tone he used when he wanted something, the tone of a gaslighter. "Baby, listen to me," he said, reaching out to touch my cheek. I pulled back sharply. He flinched. "I know you are upset about the VietNam thing," Dante said, holding his hands up in a surrender gesture. "But come on. It was a joke. It was a prank. Kyle and I were just blowing off steam. We were going to come back for you in 10 minutes. We drove around the block, and when we came back, you were gone. You ran away, Aaliyah. You abandoned me." I watched him rewrite history in real time. 10 minutes. It was 30 days. He never came back. He went to the hotel and ordered room service. But in Dante's mind, if he said it enough times, it became the truth. I was so worried Dante lied, his eyes wet with fake emotion. "I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I thought something terrible had happened to you. And here you are partying while your husband is suffering? How can you be so selfish?" I finally spoke. My voice was low, steady, and stripped of all warmth. "You left me on a dirt road in a foreign country with no money and no passport, Dante. You didn't come back. You canceled my return ticket. You locked me out of the house. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending you care." Dante waved his hand dismissively. "Details," he scoffed. "Misunderstandings. The point is, you blew this whole thing out of proportion. You reacted like a child. But I am willing to forgive you." He puffed out his chest, acting as if he was bestowing a great gift upon me. "I am willing to overlook this little stunt," he said. "I have a flight booked for us tonight. Economy because things are tight right now, thanks to your little vanishing act. We are going home." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Home?" I asked. "To what?" "To the guest room. To the pile of laundry you haven't done in a month to your life," Dante snapped. "To your responsibilities. Do you know what is happening at the office? It is chaos. Total chaos. Nobody has entered the invoices for 3 weeks. The vendors are calling me asking about shipping dates, and I don't know what to tell them because you didn't leave a memo. The filing system is a mess. I need you to come back and do the data entry, Aaliyah. I can't launch the Emperor collection if I am wasting my time doing secretary work. There it was, the core of his grievance. He wasn't missing his wife. He was missing his employee. He was missing the invisible labor that made him look competent. He reduced my role as the architect of his entire business model to data entry. I leaned back against the glass railing, looking him up and down. "I am not coming back, Dante," I said. He froze. "What did you say?" I said. "I am not coming back. I am not your secretary. I am not your maid, and I am certainly not your punchline. You left me with nothing. You thought that would break me. You thought I would crawl back to you. But you forgot that I lived a whole life before I met you. I didn't just survive the last 30 days. I built something new. I have a life here. I have respect here." Dante stared at me. His brain was struggling to process the rejection. In his world, women didn't leave him. He left them. "You are bluffing," he sneered. "You don't have a life here. You are probably sleeping with one of those old men at the table. That is it, isn't it? You are trading your body for a hotel room." I felt a flash of anger, but I pushed it down. He wanted a reaction. I wouldn't give it to him. "Think what you want," I said. "But the answer is no. Go back to Atlanta, Dante. Go back to Kyle. Figure out how to run your own company." I turned to walk away. I was done. I had said my piece. But Dante wasn't done. He stepped in front of me, blocking my path. His face was no longer pleading. It was dark, ugly, and dangerous. "You think you can just walk away," he growled. "You think you can humiliate me in front of my friends and then just disappear? You are my wife, Aaliyah. You belong to me." He took a step closer, invading my personal space. "If you don't get on that plane with me tonight," he whispered, his voice dripping with malice, "I will ruin you." I looked at him unimpressed. "How I will go to the police," Dante said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "I will report you as a runaway. I will tell them you are mentally unstable. I will tell them you stole $50,000 from the company accounts before you left." "I didn't steal anything," I said calmly. "It doesn't matter what you did," Dante countered. "It matters what I can prove, or what I can make people believe. Kyle's dad knows the district attorney in Atlanta. We can make your life hell. I will have an international warrant out for your arrest by Monday." He saw that I was listening, so he twisted the knife deeper. "And it is not just the police, Aaliyah. It is your reputation. I will go on social media. I will tell everyone that you cheated on me. I will post that you abandoned our marriage to be a call girl in Thailand. Kyle has a lot of followers. Jessica has a lot of followers. By the time we are done with you, you won't be able to get a job at a fast food restaurant, let alone in the corporate world. Everyone will know you as the crazy, unfaithful wife who stole from her husband." He leaned in so close I could smell the stale alcohol on his breath. "You will be a pariah, Aaliyah. You will be nothing. So make a choice. You can come home, apologize, and get back to work entering those invoices. Or you can stay here and watch me burn your name to the ground." It was a classic abuser's ultimatum. "Destroy yourself to serve me, or I will destroy you myself." He thought he had played the ace card. He thought the threat of scandal would terrify me. He thought the idea of the police would make me shake. He didn't know that I had been recording the entire conversation on the phone clutched in my hand. He didn't know that the stolen money was legally mine, and he certainly didn't know that the reputation he threatened to burn was about to become the torch that lit his own funeral pyre. I looked at him. I looked at the sweat on his forehead. I looked at the fear behind his aggression. "You want me to come home?" I asked softly. "Yes," he said, thinking he had won. "You want me to fix the company?" "Yes," he said, his shoulders relaxing. "Okay, Dante," I lied. "I will come home." He let out a breath, a triumphant smirk returning to his face. "Good girl," he said, reaching out to pat my arm. "I knew you would come to your senses. Go get your bag. We leave in 2 hours." I watched him walk away toward the elevator, strutting like he had just conquered a nation. He pulled out his phone, probably to call Kyle, and brag that he had handled the situation. I stood there for a moment, listening to the wind. I was going back to America, not to save him, not to be his data entry clerk. I was going back to lead him into the slaughterhouse. He wanted me in Atlanta fine. I would go to Atlanta, and I would bring the fire with me. I turned back to the table where Mr. Tuan was waiting. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Perfect," I said, picking up my wine glass. "My assistant just reminded me that I have some unfinished business in the States. I need to schedule a product launch." Mr. Tuan smiled. "The Emperor Collection." I clinked my glass against his. "Something like that," I said, "but we are going to need to rename it. I am thinking of calling it The Empress's Revenge." The decision to return to Atlanta was not made out of fear. It was made out of cold, hard calculation. As I stood on that rooftop terrace watching Dante strut toward the elevator, I ran the numbers in my head. I could have stayed in Bangkok. I could have filed for divorce from here. I could have let him rot in Thailand with his unpaid hotel bill and his maxed out credit cards. It would have been a quick victory, but it would have been an incomplete one. If I divorced him from overseas, the legal proceedings would be a nightmare. Jurisdiction issues would tie up the assets for years. He would play the victim in the American press. He would spin a story about how his unstable wife abandoned him during a business crisis. He would control the narrative because I wouldn't be there to dispute it. And most importantly, he would still have the company. He would still have the house. He would still have his dignity. No, that wasn't enough for me. I didn't just want to leave him. I wanted to dismantle him. I wanted to strip him of everything he used to define himself, his title, his money, his reputation. And to do that, I needed to get him back on American soil. I needed to get him into the boardroom for the product launch. I needed him to sign the final documents that would seal his fate. I needed to lure the mouse back into the trap. So I went back to my hotel room, the one Mr. Tuan had paid for, and I packed my bags. I folded the emerald jumpsuit. I packed away the gold earrings. I took off the bold red lipstick I had been wearing and washed my face until I looked like the plain, tired Aaliyah that Dante preferred. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. I put on a pair of sensible gray slacks and a white blouse. I looked in the mirror. The powerful woman from the rooftop was gone. In her place stood the dutiful, beaten-down wife. It was a disguise. It was camouflage. And it was the hardest role I ever had to play. When I met Dante in the lobby of his hotel an hour later, I saw the relief wash over his face. He didn't see the fire in my eyes because I was looking at the floor. He didn't hear the rage in my heart because I kept my voice barely above a whisper. "I am ready to go." "Dante," I said, clutching my bag. He looked me up and down, checking for signs of rebellion. When he saw none, his arrogance returned in full force. "Good," he said, checking his watch. "You cut it close. I almost left without you." He was lying. He couldn't leave without me. He didn't have a ticket. We took a taxi to the airport in silence. The humidity of Bangkok pressed against the windows a final goodbye from the city that had reminded me of who I really was. Dante spent the ride on his phone, furiously typing messages. He didn't look at me. He didn't ask how I had survived the last month. He didn't ask where I had stayed or what I had eaten. To him, I was just a piece of luggage that he had temporarily misplaced and now recovered. At the airport, the humiliation continued. Because Dante's cards were still declined, I had to pay for our tickets. I pulled out a debit card from a small account I kept for emergencies. "Economy," Dante ordered as I approached the counter. "We need to save money to fix the mess you caused. I bought 2 economy tickets, one way to Atlanta." When we boarded the plane, Dante took the window seat without asking. He immediately reclined his chair, encroaching on the space of the person behind him. He demanded a whiskey from the flight attendant before we even took off. I sat in the middle seat, my knees pressed against the plastic tray. I closed my eyes and listened to him breathe. Every inhale was an insult. Every exhale was a challenge. For 22 hours, he lectured me. He didn't sleep. He just talked. He listed every mistake I had ever made. He talked about how I had embarrassed him in front of Mr. Tuan. He talked about how I needed to work harder to earn back his trust. "You are lucky. I am a forgiving man, Aaliyah," he said somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. "Most men would have served you divorce papers the moment you walked away. But I believe in commitment. I believe in saving you from yourself. You need structure. You need guidance. And frankly, you would be lost without me." I nodded. "Yes, Dante." "You are right, Dante." Thank you, Dante. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I swallowed them. I stored them in the pit of my stomach, adding fuel to the furnace that would burn him alive in 48 hours. When we finally landed in Atlanta, the air was crisp and cold. It was a stark contrast to the heat of Southeast Asia. We waited at the curb for our ride. Dante had summoned Kyle to pick us up. Of course he had. He couldn't afford an Uber and he needed his audience. When Kyle's black SUV pulled up, Dante's entire demeanor changed. He straightened his spine. He puffed out his chest. He wasn't the broke, desperate husband anymore. He was the conquering hero returning from war. He threw his bags into the trunk and hopped into the front seat, leaving me to struggle with my own luggage and climb into the back. Kyle turned around, grinning like a shark. "Well, well, well," Kyle said. "Look who decided to come crawling back. The prodigal wife returns." Dante laughed, a loud booming laugh that echoed in the small space of the car. "I told you she would," Dante said, slapping Kyle on the shoulder. "They always do. She just needed a reality check." She thought the grass was greener on the other side, but she realized pretty quickly that she doesn't know how to mow the lawn. They both erupted in laughter at the mediocre joke. I sat in the back seat, staring out the window as the Atlanta skyline came into view. I saw the building where our office was located. I saw the billboard advertising the Emperor Collection launch. It was huge. It was flashy, and it was based on a lie. Dante pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. I recognized the name on the screen. It was his father. He put it on speakerphone, wanting Kyle to hear his victory lap. "Hey, Dad," Dante said. "Yeah, we just landed. Yeah, she is with me." I listened as his father asked something on the other end. No trouble," Dante replied, looking at me in the rearview mirror with a smug grin. "She came quietly. You know how it is. She put up a little fight at first, tried to act tough, but the moment I mentioned the police, she folded." He paused, listening to his father again. Then he said the words that sealed his fate, the words that I would replay in my mind every single time I felt a twinge of guilt in the days to come. "She is scared, Dad. That is what it is. You know these black women. They talk a big game about being independent, but deep down they are terrified of being alone. They don't want the stigma of being the woman who couldn't keep a man. She knows nobody else is going to want a 30-year-old secretary with an attitude problem. She knows I am her best option. She is lucky I am taking her back, and she knows it." Kyle nodded in agreement. "Amen to that, brother. You are doing charity work at this point." I looked at Dante's reflection in the mirror. He was beaming. He felt powerful. He felt secure. He truly believed that my silence was submission. He truly believed that he had broken me. He didn't know that the woman sitting in his back seat was not scared. He didn't know that she wasn't worried about being alone. He didn't know that while he was busy congratulating himself on his charity work, I was busy mentally drafting the eviction notice for the house we were driving to. I pulled out my phone. I kept it below the window line so they couldn't see. I opened my email. I found the draft I had prepared in the hotel room in Bangkok. It was addressed to the board of directors of the holding company. The subject line read, "Emergency motion to remove CEO for gross misconduct and financial negligence." I didn't hit send yet. Not yet. I needed the show to happen first. I needed the world to see the Emperor Collection. I needed the humiliation to be public. I put the phone away and looked back up at the mirror. Our eyes met. "I am just glad to be home, Dante," I said softly. He winked at me. "I bet you are, baby. Now sit back and relax. We have a big week ahead of us. You have a lot of data entry to do." Yes, I thought. I have a lot of data to enter. I have to enter the data that proves you are a fraud. I have to enter the data that transfers your assets to my name, and I have to enter the data that ends your career. The car turned into our subdivision. The iron gates opened. We drove up the long driveway to the house that I had paid for, the house that he treated like his personal palace. "Welcome home, Aaliyah," Kyle sneered. "Try not to run away again." "I won't," I whispered. "I am exactly where I need to be." The lion was back in the den. But this time, the lion wasn't the one roaring in the front seat. It was the one waiting quietly in the back, ready to bite. The driveway to the estate was lined with luxury cars, none of which belonged to the people driving them. They were leased vehicles rented specifically for appearances, parked in a long, gleaming row that blocked the entrance to the house I had purchased with my own inheritance 3 years ago. The smell of hickory smoke and expensive perfume hit me the moment I stepped out of Kyle's SUV. It was supposed to be a welcome home barbecue. Dante had called it a celebration of family unity. But as I looked at the crowd gathered on my front lawn, I knew exactly what this was. It was a public shaming disguised as a party. Dante hopped out of the front seat, instantly transforming into the benevolent patriarch. He threw his arms open, greeting the guests who were drinking his liquor and eating his food. They were his sycophants, a collection of aspiring influencers, failed entrepreneurs, and social climbers who hung around Dante because he paid the tab. They cheered when they saw him. They clapped on his back. They treated him like a war hero returning from battle rather than a man who had been stranded in Thailand with a declined credit card less than 24 hours ago. I walked behind him, dragging my suitcase across the gravel. Nobody offered to help. I was the cautionary tale. I was the bad wife who had been brought to heel. I kept my head down, playing the role they had written for me. I wore my gray slacks and plain blouse, a stark contrast to the colorful sundresses and linen suits around me. I felt the eyes on me. I heard the whispers. She actually came back. I heard he had to bail her out of jail in Bangkok. She looks terrible. Dante stopped in the middle of the patio, grabbing a microphone from the DJ stand. The music cut out. He wrapped an arm around my shoulder, pulling me in tight. His grip was possessive, almost painful. He squeezed me not out of affection, but to show everyone that he had recaptured his runaway property. "Everyone listen up," Dante announced, his voice booming through the speakers. "I just want to say how happy I am to have my wife back home. We had a little hiccup, a little miscommunication. Aaliyah needed some time to find herself. Didn't you, baby?" He looked down at me, thrusting the microphone in my face. It was a test. He wanted me to publicly admit my submission. "Yes," I whispered into the mic. "I am just glad to be home." The crowd cooed. A collective awe rippled through the patio. They ate it up. They loved the narrative of the benevolent king forgiving his wayward queen. Dante kissed my forehead, a wet, sloppy gesture that made my skin crawl. "Now let's eat," he shouted. The music started again. Dante released me and immediately turned to high-five a group of men by the grill. I was left standing alone with my suitcase invisible once again. I started to walk toward the house, desperate to get away from the noise, but my path was blocked. Jessica stepped in front of me. She was wearing a white lace dress that looked suspiciously like a bridal gown, holding a glass of rosé in one hand and a plate of ribs in the other. Her blonde hair was perfectly curled, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Well, look who it is," Jessica said, her voice loud enough to carry over the music. The world traveler. A small circle formed around us. Kyle's friends, Dante's cousins. They sensed blood in the water. "Hi, Jessica," I said, trying to step around her. "Not so fast," she said, stepping to the right to block me again. "We are all dying to hear about your trip." She looked around at her audience, her eyes gleaming with malice. "I heard it was quite the adventure, Aaliyah. Backpacking through Southeast Asia, finding yourself in the rice paddies. It sounds so rustic." She took a sip of her wine, looking me up and down with exaggerated pity. "But tell me," she continued, her voice dripping with fake concern, "was it fun spending Dante's money to go on a vacation while he was back here working himself to death?" The accusation hung in the air. The guests murmured. They shook their heads. To them, I was the leech. I was the gold digger who had taken the hard-earned money of a successful black man and blown it on a selfish joyride. I tightened my grip on my suitcase handle. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that the wine she was drinking was paid for by my dividends. I wanted to tell her that the dress she was wearing was bought with a supplemental card linked to my trust. I wanted to tell her that Dante hadn't worked a day in his life, but I couldn't. Not yet. The trap wasn't fully set. "It wasn't a vacation, Jessica," I said, keeping my voice low and trembling. "I was stranded." "Oh, please," Jessica laughed, waving her hand dismissively. "Stranded. You had a month, Aaliyah. You could have called. You could have walked to an embassy. But you didn't. You stayed there because you wanted to punish him. You wanted to make him suffer because you couldn't handle the pressure of being a CEO's wife." She leaned in close, her perfume overpowering the smell of the barbecue. "You know most women would kill to be in your position," she hissed. "You have a husband who provides everything, a house like this, a life of luxury. And what do? You run away like a spoiled brat the moment things get real. It is embarrassing, Aaliyah. Frankly, I don't know why he took you back." I looked at her. I looked at the smug satisfaction on her face. She enjoyed this. She enjoyed seeing the black woman humbled. She enjoyed feeling superior in a house she couldn't afford to rent, let alone own. "I am sorry you feel that way," I said, looking at the ground. "I am not the only one," she replied, turning her back on me. "Everyone here thinks you are a joke." She walked away laughing with her friends. I stood there taking the humiliation, letting it fuel me. I walked up the stairs to the front porch, finally reaching the sanctuary of the front door. But before I could turn the handle, the door opened from the inside. It was Kyle. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't holding a drink. He was holding a thick manila envelope. "We need to talk," Kyle said. He didn't move out of the way. He stood in the doorway, blocking my entry into my own home. "Can I just put my bag down?" I asked. "I have been traveling for 2 days." "This won't take long," Kyle said. "Come into the study." He turned and walked into the house. I followed him. The interior of the house was cool and dark, a relief from the Atlanta sun. But the atmosphere was colder than the air conditioning. We walked past the living room where I had spent countless nights working on the company's books while Dante played video games. We walked into the study, the room where the real decisions were made. Dante was already there. He was sitting behind the massive oak desk, the one I had bought him for his 30th birthday. He was leaning back in the leather chair, looking at the ceiling. When I walked in, he didn't sit up. He just swiveled his chair to face me. "Close the door," Kyle commanded. I closed the door. The sounds of the party faded, replaced by the heavy silence of an interrogation room. "Sit," Dante said, pointing to the small wooden chair across from the desk. I sat. I placed my hands in my lap, looking from Dante to Kyle. "What is this?" I asked. Kyle tossed the manila envelope onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud. "This," Kyle said, leaning against the bookshelf, "is your reality check." Dante picked up the envelope and slid it across the desk toward me. "Open it," he said. I opened the envelope. Inside was a legal document. It was thick, at least 50 pages. I recognized the formatting immediately. I had drafted enough contracts in my life to know exactly what I was looking at. The header read Post, Nuptial Agreement, and Asset Allocation Amendment. I looked up at Dante. "On a post-nup, read the summary on page 1, Kyle said. I looked down at the paper. My eyes scanned the legal jargon. It was brutal. It was a complete dismantling of my rights. Clause 1. The wife, Aaliyah Williams, admits to financial misconduct and abandonment of marital duties. Clause 2. In the event of a divorce, the wife waives all rights to alimony, spousal support, or claim to any assets acquired during the marriage, including but not limited to the company known as the Emperor Group and the marital residence. Clause 3. The wife agrees to transfer full executive control and power of attorney to the husband Dante Williams effective immediately as restitution for financial damages caused by her absence. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, but I choked it down. It was absurd. It was legally unenforceable. It was written by someone who had clearly used a template from the internet. They were accusing me of financial misconduct. They were asking me to sign over assets that weren't even in their names. Why, I asked, my voice shaking with feigned fear. "Why are you doing this? Because you are a liability." Dante said, his voice cold and flat. He leaned forward, placing his elbows on the desk. "You disappeared for a month, Aaliyah. Do you have any idea how much money that cost us? We missed shipping deadlines. We had to pay late fees. My credit score took a hit because you weren't here to pay the bills. You caused actual quantifiable damage to this family." He was projecting. He was blaming me for his own incompetence. He was blaming me for the fact that he couldn't pay a bill without me holding his hand. "We can't trust you anymore," Kyle added. "You proved that you are unstable. You proved that you will run away when things get tough. We have a major launch coming up. The Emperor Collection is going to be worth millions. We can't have you having another episode and freezing the accounts right when we are about to cash out. So this is punishment?" I asked. "No," Dante said. "This is insurance." He tapped the document with his finger. This agreement says that you are committed to this marriage. It says that you are here to work, not to play games. It says that you acknowledge your mistake and you are willing to do whatever it takes to fix it. And if I don't sign, I asked. Dante sat back, crossing his arms over his chest. Then you can leave, he said. Right now. You can take your suitcase, walk back out that door, and figure out how to survive on the streets. I will file for divorce tomorrow on the grounds of abandonment. I will tell the judge you stole money. I will tell everyone you are a thief. You will leave this marriage with nothing but the clothes on your back. He looked at me with total confidence. He thought he held all the cards. He thought I was destitute. He thought I had nowhere to go. I looked at the document again. I pretended to read it, but my mind was racing. This was it. This was the final layer of their trap. They wanted to strip me of my legal standing. They wanted to turn me into an indentured servant in my own company. But they had made a fatal error. They assumed that the assets listed in this document belonged to Dante. They assumed that by signing this, I was giving up my claim to his property. In reality, by signing this, I was giving up nothing. Because Dante didn't own the company. He didn't own the house. He didn't own the cars. The holding company owned everything, and I owned the holding company. This document was a confession. By asking me to sign it, they were documenting their intent to coerce and defraud me. It was the final piece of evidence I needed for the board meeting. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled just enough to sell the performance. Dante watched me, his eyes hungry. Kyle smirked, crossing his arms. If I sign this, I whispered, you won't throw me out. Dante smiled. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a lamb. If you sign that, he said, you can stay. You can go back to being my wife. You can go back to being useful. I looked at the paper. I looked at the line that required my signature. I just want to be a good wife, I said, my voice cracking. Then prove it, Kyle said. I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed my name, not my full legal signature, the one I used for the bank accounts, but the messy, scrawled signature of a terrified woman. I pushed the document back across the desk. Dante snatched it up. He looked at the signature, then looked at Kyle. They grinned at each other. They thought they had just won the lottery. Good girl, Dante said. He opened a drawer and tossed the document inside as if it were a trivial receipt. Now he said, standing up, get out of my office. You have work to do. The guest bathroom is a mess and I need my suit pressed for tomorrow. I stood up. I walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the knob. Dante, I asked. What he snapped, already looking at his phone. Does this mean I have access to the accounts again, to pay the vendors? He laughed. Access, no. You prepare the payments. You bring them to me. I will authorize them. I am in charge now, Aaliyah. Remember that. Okay, I said. I will remember. I walked out of the study and closed the door. I heard them high-fiving. I heard Kyle say, that was easier than I thought. I walked through the hallway, past the laughing guests outside, and up the stairs to the master bedroom. I went into the walk-in closet. I didn't unpack my suitcase. I didn't press his suit. I sat down on the floor and pulled out my burner phone. I took a photo of the copy of the Post-Enup that I had sleight of hand slipped into my pocket while they were gloating. I attached the photo to the email draft I had prepared. Subject evidence item number 4, attempted coercion and fraud. I added one line to the body of the email. He has formally claimed ownership of assets he does not possess. The trap is sprung. Proceed with the emergency board meeting. I hit send. Downstairs, the party was raging. They were celebrating their victory. Upstairs, in the silence of the closet, I closed my eyes and smiled. Enjoy the barbecue, Dante. It is the last meal you will ever eat in this house. For the next 72 hours, I ceased to be a human being and became a machine. Dante Williams did not want a wife. He wanted a processor. He wanted a servant who could type 100 words per minute and anticipate his every whim before he even vocalized it. He stripped me of every comfort. He took away my access to the main bank accounts, leaving me with a prepaid debit card that had a $50 daily limit. He monitored my internet usage. He even timed my bathroom breaks. I woke up at 4 in the morning every single day. My first task was to press his suits for the media interviews he had lined up to promote the launch. My second task was to brew his specific blend of Ethiopian coffee, ensuring it was exactly 180 degrees. If it was too cold, he would pour it into the sink while looking me in the eye. If it was too hot, he would sigh loudly and ask if I had forgotten how to boil water during my vacation. I accepted it all. I lowered my head. I said, "Yes, sir." I apologized for mistakes I didn't make. I played the role of the beaten dog so perfectly that even Kyle started to look bored with bullying me. The workload was inhumane. Dante had neglected the company for a month while he was chasing me, and now he expected me to fix an entire fiscal quarter in 3 days. I sat at the small desk in the hallway he had banned me from the main study because I hadn't earned the privilege of a leather chair, and I worked. I processed hundreds of invoices. I reconciled the shipping manifests. I responded to angry emails from vendors who hadn't been paid. But Dante didn't check my work. He was too busy looking at himself in the mirror and practicing his speech for the gala. If he had checked, he would have noticed that the invoices I was approving were not going to his usual suppliers. They were going to shell companies registered in Singapore. He would have noticed that the shipping manifests for the silk delivery listed the content weight as significantly lighter than high-grade mulberry silk should be. But Dante saw what he wanted to see. He saw his wife working 18 hours a day to make him rich. He saw the stack of papers growing on his desk, waiting for his final signature. He signed them without reading. He signed the purchase orders. He signed the venue rental agreements. He signed the liability waivers. With every stroke of his pen, he was digging his own grave, and I was the one handing him the shovel. The climax of this farce was the arrival of the inventory. The delivery trucks from the port arrived on Tuesday morning, 48 hours before the launch. They carried 50 large crates stamped with the logo of the Golden Dragon Textile Company. Dante stood on the front porch watching the workers unload the crates. He looked like a general surveying his spoils of war. He was wearing a silk robe, ironic considering what was in the boxes, and holding a cigar. "Open one up," Kyle shouted from the driveway. "Let's see the goods." Dante waved a hand. "No need. I trust the supplier. Besides, we don't want to expose the fabric to the humidity before the show. Just get them into the warehouse. We will unbox them on stage. It will be a reveal. The world needs to see the quality live." I stood behind him holding his clipboard. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. He was going to unbox them on live television. He was going to open crates of industrial waste and polyester scraps in front of the global press. It was better than I could have planned. He turned to me, blowing smoke in my face. "Make sure the inventory is logged, Aaliyah. And don't mess up the count. If a single yard is missing, I am taking it out of your non-existent allowance." "Yes, Dante," I said, making a check mark on the clipboard. That afternoon, Jessica came over to help with the seating chart for the gala. She sat at the dining room table, moving little magnetic name tags around a board. She put the investors at the front. She put the press in the middle. And then she held up a magnet with my name on it. "Where should we put you?" Jessica mused, tapping the magnet against her chin. "We can't put you at the head table. That is for the executives. And we can't put you with the press because you might say something stupid." She smiled, a cruel, thin-lipped smile. "I know. We will put you near the kitchen entrance. That way, if the catering staff needs help clearing plates, you are right there. It feels appropriate, don't you think?" I looked at the seating chart. The table near the kitchen was in the shadows. It was the table for the B-list guests and the assistants. "That sounds perfect, Jessica," I said. "I wouldn't want to be in the way." She laughed. "You are finally learning your place. It is amazing what a little hunger does to a person." I went back to my hallway desk and continued typing. I wasn't typing emails to vendors anymore. I was typing the final script for the teleprompter. Dante had asked me to write his speech. He wanted something visionary. He wanted to sound like Steve Jobs meeting Gianni Versace. I wrote him a speech. It was beautiful. It was full of words like integrity, transparency, and legacy. Words that would taste like poison when he spoke them next to a pile of garbage. By Wednesday night, the house was buzzing with manic energy. The launch was 24 hours away. Dante was pacing the living room high on adrenaline and caffeine. He was shouting orders at everyone. "Kyle, did you confirm the DJ?" "Jessica?" Did you pick up my tuxedo? Aaliyah, where is my protein shake? I brought him his shake. He took it without looking at me. You know, he said to Kyle, taking a sip, I think this was a blessing in disguise. Aaliyah leaving, I mean. It showed me that I need to be tighter on the reins. Look at how efficient we are now. She just needed a firm hand. Kyle nodded. You are a natural leader, Dee. You turned a crisis into a well-oiled machine. I walked back to the shadows of the hallway. I looked at the clock. It was 10 at night. The rain had started to fall outside, a heavy rhythmic drumming against the roof. It was the same kind of rain that falls during monsoon season in Vietnam. It felt like a sign. I had one final card to play. The isolation was complete. The financial strip mining was complete. Now I needed the catalyst. I needed him to throw me out one last time. I needed the final act of aggression to justify the nuclear response I had prepared for tomorrow. I went into the study. Dante had allowed me in there for 5 minutes to file the final contracts. He was in the kitchen with Kyle, celebrating their impending victory. I sat down at his desk. I opened my personal email on his laptop. I composed a new message. I addressed it to a well-known divorce attorney in Atlanta. I didn't send it. I just left it open on the screen. The subject line was Asset Recovery and Domestic Abuse Evidence. The body of the email read, Dear Mr. Henderson, I have compiled the recordings of my husband threatening me in Bangkok. I also have the coerced post-nuptial agreement. I am ready to proceed with the filing. He believes I am submissive, but I am gathering the final documents to expose his fraud. I left the cursor blinking at the end of the sentence. Then I knocked over a glass of water. It wasn't a big spill, but it was loud enough. The glass shattered on the hardwood floor. I heard the laughter stop in the kitchen. I heard heavy footsteps approaching. What did you break now? Dante shouted, walking into the room. I stood up, feigning panic. I tried to block the computer screen with my body. Nothing, I stammered. I just dropped a glass. I am sorry. I will clean it up. Dante pushed past me. You are so clumsy. I swear you are useless. He looked down at the shattered glass. Then he looked up at me. He saw the fear in my eyes. But then his eyes drifted over my shoulder. He saw the glowing screen of the laptop. He saw the word divorce in the email preview. He froze. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. The vein in his forehead began to throb. He didn't speak. He just reached out and shoved me aside. He leaned in and read the email. I watched his face transform. It went from annoyance to confusion, and then to a rage so pure it looked demonic. Domestic abuse, he whispered. Fraud. He turned to me slowly. You are recording me. I backed away until my back hit the bookshelf. I have to protect myself. Dante, I cried, letting the tears fall. You made me sign that paper. You threatened me. He laughed, a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Protect yourself. You think a recording is going to protect you. He grabbed the laptop. It was a $3,000 MacBook Pro. He lifted it over his head and smashed it down onto the edge of the mahogany desk. The screen shattered. Keys flew everywhere. He smashed it again and again until it was nothing but twisted metal and plastic. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. You are a snake, he spat. I take you back. I give you a home. I give you a second chance, and this is what you do. You plot against me in my own house. He advanced on me. I shrank down, making myself look small. Dante, please, I begged. I didn't send it. I was just scared. Scared, he screamed. You should be scared. He grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising. He dragged me out of the study, through the hallway, past the kitchen where Kyle was watching with his mouth open. Dante, wait, Kyle said. We have the launch tomorrow. We need her for the... Shut up, Kyle, Dante roared. I don't need her. I don't need anyone. She is a traitor. He dragged me to the front door. He fumbled with the lock, cursing under his breath. He threw the door open. The sound of the storm filled the house. The wind was howling. The rain was coming down in sheets. He shoved me. I stumbled across the porch and fell onto the wet concrete of the driveway. The rain soaked me instantly. My blouse clung to my skin. The cold water mixed with the hot tears on my face. Dante stood in the doorway, framed by the warm light of the house. He looked like a giant. Get out! He screamed. "But Dante, I have nowhere to go," I cried, looking up at him from the mud. "It is raining." "I don't care," he yelled. "Go to your lawyer. Go to the police. See if they care. I have your signature on the post-it-note. I have your signature on the inventory logs. You admitted to everything. You are worthless, Aaliyah. You are nothing but a liability." He reached back into the hallway and grabbed my purse from the entry table. He rifled through it, pulling out the credit cards and the car keys. He threw the empty bag at me. It landed in a puddle. "You want to leave, but you leave with nothing. Walk, just like you did in Vietnam. Let's see how far you get this time." He slammed the door. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I heard him shouting at Kyle inside. I stayed on the ground for a moment, letting the rain wash over me. I looked at the closed door. I looked at the house that I had bought, the house that I was currently being evicted from. Slowly, I pushed myself up. I wiped the mud from my hands. I picked up my empty purse. I wasn't crying anymore. The performance was over. I stood in the driveway, drenched and shivering, and I started to laugh. It started as a low chuckle and grew into a full-throated laugh that rivaled the thunder. He thought he had destroyed me. He thought he had discarded me. He didn't realize that he had just fired the only person who knew how to turn on the lights at the launch tomorrow. He didn't realize that the laptop he smashed contained the only copy of his speech. He didn't realize that by kicking me out, he had removed the final obstacle to my takeover. I walked down the long driveway past the leased luxury cars. I didn't walk to the street. I walked to the guest house at the back of the property, a building Dante never visited because he thought it was beneath him. I used the spare key hidden under the rock, the key he didn't know existed. I let myself in. I turned on the lights. Inside, sitting on the small table, was a dry set of clothes, a secure laptop, and a phone. I picked up the phone. I dialed Madame Nguyen. "It is done," I said. "Is he ready?" she asked. "He is ready," I replied, looking out the window at the main house. The lights were blazing. Dante was probably pouring himself a drink, celebrating his strength. "Tomorrow the Emperor falls," I said. I hung up the phone. I took a hot shower. I put on my war paint. Dante Williams had won the battle of the night, but tomorrow, in front of the entire world, he was going to lose the war, and I would be sitting in the front row to watch him burn. The grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel in Atlanta was transformed into a golden palace for the night. The air smelled of expensive lilies and desperation. Every major fashion editor from New York to Paris was there holding champagne flutes and whispering about the mysterious Emperor collection. The live-stream cameras were positioned at every angle, broadcasting the event to millions of viewers worldwide. The chat rooms were buzzing. The hashtags were trending. Dante Williams had promised a revolution in luxury fashion, and the world was watching to see if he could deliver. I was watching too. I was sitting in the back row of the mezzanine level, obscured by the shadows and a wide-brimmed hat. I had a clear view of the stage, but nobody had a clear view of me. I watched as the people who had tried to destroy me walked around the room like they owned it. Kyle and Jessica were holding court near the red carpet entrance. They looked magnificent and terrible. Jessica was wearing a silver gown that shimmered under the lights, a dress she had bought with the company credit card I had secretly reactivated just for this purpose, knowing it would add another count of embezzlement to the file. She was talking to a reporter from Vogue, her hand resting possessively on Kyle's arm. "We are just so proud of Dante." Jessica gushed, her voice shrill enough to cut through the ambient jazz music. "It has been a hard few months. We had to overcome some serious internal obstacles. There was a lot of dead weight in the company that we finally managed to cut loose." She was talking about me. She was calling me dead weight on national television. Kyle nodded, sipping his drink with that familiar smirk. "That is right," Kyle added, leaning into the microphone. "You know, sometimes you have people in your circle who just don't share the vision. They are small-minded. They are administrative, not creative. Once we got rid of the negative energy, the Emperor collection just flowed out of us. This line represents pure, unadulterated genius. It is what happens when you let men be men." The reporter nodded, scribbling down their words. They were writing their own epitaphs, and they didn't even know it. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd of 500 people. The music shifted from soft jazz to a deep, thumping bass that rattled the crystal chandeliers. A spotlight hit the center of the stage. Dante walked out. He looked every inch the billionaire he pretended to be. He was wearing a custom tuxedo that fit him perfectly, largely because I had spent 3 years managing his diet and his tailor appointments. He walked with a swagger that bordered on aggressive. He absorbed the applause, opening his arms wide as if to hug the entire room. He loved this. He lived for this. This was the moment he had sacrificed his marriage and his morality for. He stepped up to the podium. He placed his hands on the sleek acrylic surface and looked out at the sea of faces. He didn't have notes. He didn't need them. He had memorized the speech I wrote for him. The speech about integrity. The speech about truth. Welcome. Dante began, his voice deep and commanding. Tonight is not just about clothes. It is about a legacy. For too long, the fashion industry has been built on lies. It has been built on shortcuts. But the Emperor Collection is different. It is built on transparency. It is built on the finest materials Earth has to offer, sourced directly from the highlands of Vietnam. He paused for effect, just like I had taught him. The audience leaned in. I went there myself. Dante continued, looking directly into the camera. I walked the fields. I touched the silkworms. I ensured that every single thread that touches your skin is pure, because you cannot put a price on authenticity. You cannot fake quality, and you certainly cannot fake class. The crowd erupted in applause. Kyle and Jessica were clapping the loudest from the front row, beaming up at their creation. Dante raised a hand to silence the room. I know there have been rumors, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Rumors about my personal life. Rumors about my management style. But tonight, I let the work speak for itself. Tonight, I show you what a focused, unburdened man can achieve. He turned toward the massive velvet curtain behind him. It was 20 feet tall, hiding the row of mannequins that displayed the debut looks of the collection. Ladies and gentlemen, Dante shouted, his voice reaching a crescendo. I give you the Emperor Collection. The music swelled to a climax. The drums pounded. Dante grabbed the golden cord and pulled it with a dramatic flourish. The velvet curtain dropped to the floor. For a split second, there was silence. The kind of silence that happens after a car crash before the screaming starts. Then there was a gasp, a collective horrified intake of breath from 500 people. The mannequins were not wearing silk. They were not wearing gowns. They were not wearing suits. The first mannequin was naked, save for a clear plastic dry cleaning bag wrapped around its waist. The second mannequin was wearing a burlap potato sack that had holes cut out for the arms, with the words processed rice printed on the front in faded blue ink. The third mannequin was draped in a tangled mess of fishing nets and dirty industrial rags, smelling faintly of motor oil. The fourth mannequin was wearing a sandwich board that simply read, I am a fraud. The stage looked like a landfill. It looked like the aftermath of a dumpster fire. Dante stood there, his arms still wide open, a smile frozen on his face. He didn't see it yet. He was looking at the audience, expecting thunderous applause. He was expecting a standing ovation. Instead, he saw confusion. He saw the reporter from Vogue cover her mouth with her hand. He saw the investors in the second row stand up, their faces turning red with anger. Dante turned around. The smile slid off his face like slop. His eyes bulged. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over the fallen velvet curtain. He blinked, rubbing his eyes as if he were hallucinating. He reached out and touched the burlap sack on the second mannequin. It was rough. It was real. What is this? He whispered into the hot microphone. Then he screamed it. What is this? Where are the clothes? Who did this? Kyle jumped up from the front row. He scrambled onto the stage, looking frantically at the rags. It is a mistake, Kyle yelled at the crowd, waving his hands. It is the wrong shipment. Security closed the curtain, but there was no curtain. It was on the floor. The live stream chat was going nuclear. I looked down at my phone. The comments were flying by so fast they were a blur. Is this a joke? Is this performance art? He is selling trash. The Emperor literally has no clothes. The photographers recovered from their shock and started snapping pictures. The flashes were blinding. Pop, pop, pop. They were capturing the humiliation in high definition. Dante trying to cover a naked mannequin with his tuxedo jacket. Kyle trying to rip the fishing net off another one. But the show wasn't over. I had one more surprise. Dante ran to the podium, grabbing the microphone. The feedback squealed, making everyone cover their ears. "Please remain calm," Dante shouted, sweating profusely. "We have a technical difficulty with the wardrobe department, but the brand is more than the clothes. The brand is the story. Watch the screen. Watch the journey." He pointed desperately to the gigantic LED screen that spanned the entire back wall of the stage. It was supposed to play a cinematic montage of him walking through silk fields in slow motion. I pressed a button on my laptop from the mezzanine. The screen flickered to life. But it wasn't a high-definition commercial. It was grainy footage. It was shaky. It was recorded from the dashboard of a Jeep Wrangler. The audio boomed through the ballroom speakers, crisp and clear. "Let's see how she gets back." Dante's voice echoed through the room. On the screen, the audience saw the back of a woman standing on a dirt road. They saw her shrinking in the distance as the car drove away. Then they heard the laughter. The cruel, hysterical laughter of two men. The camera turned. It showed the interior of the car. It showed Dante driving. It showed Kyle in the passenger seat holding a beer. "She is such a buzzkill." Kyle's voice rang out, amplified to a deafening volume. "I don't know why you married her, bro. She is so heavy. You know?" "Yeah, well," Dante replied on the screen, taking a swig of whiskey while driving. "She is good for the paperwork. She keeps the books. But man, sometimes I just want to leave her in the jungle. Let her find her roots, if you know what I mean." The audience in the ballroom gasped again. This time it wasn't shock. It was disgust. The racism in the comment was undeniable. The cruelty was palpable. On the screen, Kyle laughed. "Roots. That is funny. Do you think she will be okay?" "It is getting dark. Who cares?" Dante said, smiling at the camera. "She has no passport. She has no money. Let her walk. Maybe she will lose a few pounds. Maybe she will learn to appreciate me. She is nothing without me. She is just a glorified secretary I picked up from the projects." The video cut to a new clip. It was Dante in the hotel room in Bangkok, unaware he was being recorded by my phone. "You are my property, Aaliyah." Dante was screaming on the massive screen, his face twisted in rage. "I own you! You sign what I tell you to sign. If you try to leave me, I will destroy you. I will tell the world you are a thief." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. The only sound was the heavy breathing of the man on stage. Dante was staring up at the screen, paralyzed. He was watching his own soul being flayed open for the world to see. He looked at the audience. He saw the disgust in their eyes. He saw the investors walking out. He saw the black investors, the ones he had courted so aggressively, looking at him with pure hatred. "Turn it off!" Dante screamed at the tech booth. "Turn it off!" But the tech booth was empty. I had paid the technician $5,000 to take a smoke break at exactly 8 o'clock. The video continued. It showed Kyle mocking my hair. It showed Jessica calling me a diversity hire. It showed every secret ugly thing they had said when they thought I wasn't listening. Jessica, who was still standing in the front row, tried to run for the exit, but the press blocked her path. They shoved microphones in her face. "Is this how you speak about your family? Did you know about the abuse? Are you part of the fraud?" Jessica swatted at the cameras, screaming, crying, her mascara running down her face. On stage, Kyle tried to grab Dante. "We have to go, D. We have to go now." But Dante couldn't move. He was watching the chat feed on the side of the screen. The comments had changed. Monster, abuser, racist, lock him up. Then the final image appeared on the screen. It wasn't a video. It was a document. It was a bank statement. It showed the balance of the Emperor Group's operating account. Balance $0. It showed a transfer receipt. Amount $2, $500, $1,000. Recipient: the Aaliyah Williams Revocable Trust. Memo: repayment of unauthorized loans and emotional damages. The crowd went wild. Someone in the back started booing. Then someone else joined in. Soon the entire room was chanting, "Shame, shame, shame." Dante fell to his knees. He was surrounded by garbage clothes, illuminated by the evidence of his own cruelty, and drowning in the sound of his empire collapsing. I stood up from my seat in the mezzanine. I adjusted my hat. I looked down at the stage one last time. It was a masterpiece. It was a better show than he could have ever produced. I turned and walked toward the exit. The air in the hallway was cool and quiet. I walked past the security guards who were rushing toward the ballroom. I walked out the front doors of the hotel and into the Atlanta night. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Madame Nguyen. "Did you see his face?" she wrote. I typed back a single word, "Yes." I got into the waiting car. It wasn't a taxi this time. It was a private driver. "Where to?" Ms. Williams, the driver, asked. "The airport," I said. "I have a factory to visit in Vietnam, the real one this time." As the car pulled away, I looked back at the hotel. I could see the flashing lights of police cars arriving. Dante had threatened to call the police on me for days. It seemed he was finally going to get his wish. They were coming for him. The emperor was naked, and the queen had already left the building. The chaos in the ballroom was a physical weight. The chanting of the crowd, the flashing of the cameras, and the wailing of the alarm systems created a cacophony of destruction. Dante was kneeling center stage, clutching a handful of dirty fishing nets, looking like a man who had just watched his entire reality dissolve into mist. Kyle was trying to crawl off the side of the stage, but the photographers had blocked his exit, blinding him with strobe lights. Jessica was sobbing in the front row, her silver dress looking cheap under the harsh house lights that had just been turned on. But then the sound changed. The audio from the screen cut out. The chanting slowly died down, replaced by a murmur of confusion. A single bright spotlight cut through the darkness of the upper balcony. It didn't aim at the stage. It aimed at the most exclusive seat in the house, the private box reserved for the chairman of the board, a seat that had remained empty all night, or so everyone thought. I stood up. I walked to the edge of the balcony. The spotlight caught the emerald green of my dress, the same one I had worn in Bangkok. I wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. I wasn't the admin girl in the gray slacks. I was the woman who signed the checks. A hush fell over the room. 500 heads turned upward. Dante looked up, shielding his eyes from the glare. When he saw me, his mouth fell open. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked down the grand staircase that led to the stage. My heels clicked against the marble steps, a rhythmic, terrifying sound that echoed in the silence. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. They sensed the power radiating off me. They didn't know exactly who I was yet, but they knew I was the one holding the gavel. I walked up the stairs to the stage. I stepped over the pile of burlap sacks. I stepped past the naked mannequin. I walked right up to Dante, who was still on his knees. I looked down at him. He looked small. He looked fragile. I reached out and took the microphone from his trembling hand. I tapped it once. The sound thumped through the speakers, a heartbeat of judgment. "Hello, Dante," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and amplified to fill every corner of the room. "Aaliyah," he whispered, his voice cracking. You did this." I gestured to the garbage surrounding us. "I didn't do this, Dante. You did." I walked over to the mannequin wearing the potato sack. I ran my hand over the rough fabric. "You stood here and told these people that you personally sourced the finest materials from Vietnam. You told them you walked the fields. You told them you ensured every thread was pure." I turned to face him. "But you didn't read the contract, did you?" Dante scrambled to his feet, trying to regain some shred of dignity. "I signed the contract," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I signed with the Golden Dragon Company. I paid $50,000. You set me up." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "You signed a contract written in Vietnamese, Dante, a language you don't speak, a language you didn't think was worth learning because you thought you could just bully your way through the country." I reached into my clutch and pulled out the original contract. I unfolded it. "Let me translate Clause 4 for you, since you were too busy drinking beer to ask for a translator. The buyer, Dante Williams, agrees to purchase 5 tons of Phê Lu Tai Che." I looked at the audience. "Does anyone here speak Vietnamese? No. Well, let me help you. Phê Lu Tai Che does not mean premium silk. It means recycled waste scrap. The crowd gasped. A ripple of laughter started in the back and spread to the front. "You bought garbage." "Dante?" I continued, my voice dripping with disdain. "You bought the sweepings from the factory floor. And because you were so arrogant, because you thought you were the smartest man in the room, you signed off on it without checking a single crate. You wanted to be the emperor. Well, congratulations. You are the emperor of trash." Dante's face turned a deep, violacious purple. He looked ready to explode. "This is fraud," he screamed. "You defrauded me. I will sue you. I will take everything." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the crumpled copy of the post-nuptial agreement I had signed the day before. He waved it in the air like a weapon. "I have your signature," he yelled, turning to the cameras. "She signed it. She admitted to financial misconduct. She waived her rights to the company. The Emperor Group belongs to me. She has nothing." He looked at me, his eyes wild with triumph. "You played yourself, Aaliyah. This document proves I own everything." "Get off my stage." I laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was a genuine, belly-deep laugh that echoed through the ballroom. "Oh, Dante," I said, wiping a tear from my eye. "You really don't understand how business works, do you?" I took a step closer to him. "A post-nuptial agreement only applies to assets that you actually own. You cannot waive rights to property that doesn't belong to the husband in the first place." I turned to the giant LED screen behind me. I signaled the tech booth with a nod. The image on the screen changed. Gone was the embarrassing video. In its place was a complex corporate organizational chart. At the bottom was the Emperor Group LLC. Above that was a line connecting it to a parent company, Vesta Holdings International. And above that, at the very top of the pyramid, was a single name listed as the sole proprietor and chairman, Aaliyah Williams. The audience murmured as they read the chart. The investors in the front row started whispering frantically. Dante turned around and looked at the screen. He squinted. He read the names. He read the structure. "What is this?" he stammered. "This is the corporate structure you never bothered to ask about," I said. "You see, Dante, when we started this business 5 years ago, your credit score was below 500. You couldn't open a bank account, let alone a company. So I opened it. I formed Vesta Holdings in Singapore to protect the assets. I pointed to the box labeled the Emperor Group. This company, the one you think you run, it is a wholly owned subsidiary of my holding company. You don't own shares. You don't own equity. You don't even own the trademark to the name the Emperor." Dante shook his head, denial washing over him. "No," he said. "No. I am the CEO. I sign the checks." I stepped closer, invading his personal space. "You are an employee, Dante. You are a salaried manager. I gave you the title of CEO because it made you feel important. I let you sign the checks because it made you feel like a man. But legally, you are just staff." I let the word hang in the air. Staff. The very thing he had treated with such contempt. "And do you know what happens to staff who embarrass the chairman?" I asked. Dante looked at me. The fight was leaving his eyes. He was beginning to understand the magnitude of his error. I pulled another document from my clutch. It was a single sheet of paper. "This is your employment contract," I said. Clause 14, Section B. "Any employee who engages in conduct that brings public disrepute, scandal, or ridicule to the brand shall be subject to immediate termination with cause." I pointed to the screen where the video of him abandoning me in Vietnam was frozen on a frame of his cruel, laughing face. "That video," I said. "That is the definition of public disrepute. You went viral, Dante. But not for your clothes. You went viral for being an abuser. You destroyed the brand image in less than 10 minutes. Dante looked at Kyle. Kyle was looking at the floor, trying to disappear. Kyle knew. Dante whispered. "Kyle is on the board of advisors," I said. "He saw the structure years ago. He just assumed you knew. Or maybe he didn't care enough to tell you." Dante looked back at me. He was trembling. "You can't do this," he pleaded, his voice dropping to a whisper. "This is my life. Aaliyah, please. We can fix this. I am sorry. I will apologize. Just don't take it away." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had left me on a dirt road. I looked at the man who had smashed my laptop. I looked at the man who had called me nothing. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel love. I felt nothing but the cold, hard satisfaction of a ledger finally being balanced. I raised the microphone to my lips one last time. "Dante Williams," I said. The room went silent. "You are fired." The words rang out like a gunshot. "Security." I commanded, my voice snapping like a whip. 4 large men in black suits materialized from the wings of the stage. They weren't the hotel security. They were my private security team. They marched onto the stage. 2 of them grabbed Dante by the arms. 2 of them grabbed Kyle. "Get off me," Dante screamed, struggling against their grip. "This is my show. This is my night. It is over, Dante," I said, turning my back on him. "Get him out of my building." The security guards dragged him away. He was kicking and screaming, his tuxedo jacket tearing his shoes, scuffing against the stage. He was dragged past the naked mannequins, past the piles of garbage, and down the stairs. The photographers swarmed him, capturing every moment of his disgrace. I stood alone on the stage. The spotlight was still on me. The audience was stunned. Nobody moved. I looked out at the press. I looked out at the investors. "I am sorry for the inconvenience," I said, my voice calm and professional. "The Emperor Group will be undergoing a restructuring effective immediately. All investments will be refunded by morning. The brand is under new management." I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a loud thud. I walked off the stage, not toward the back, but toward the front. I walked down the stairs and straight up the center aisle. I walked past Jessica, who was trying to hide her face with her purse. I didn't even look at her. She wasn't worth my time. I walked out of the ballroom doors and into the lobby. The air was cool. The silence was heavy. I stopped for a moment to catch my breath. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had done it. I had burned it all down. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. Transaction complete. Payroll termination processed. I smiled. I walked out to the waiting car where the driver opened the door for me. "To the airport, Ms. Williams?" he asked. "Yes," I said, sliding into the leather seat. "I have a flight to catch." I wasn't running away this time. I was flying toward something. I was flying toward a future where I didn't have to shrink to fit into someone else's life. I was flying toward a future where the only empire I built was my own. As the car pulled away, I saw Dante being thrown out of the side exit of the hotel. He landed in a puddle just like he had thrown me. He looked up, rain soaking his face, and watched my car disappear into the night. Checkmate. The sight of 3 people who believed they were untouchable being handled like common criminals is an image I will cherish for the rest of my life. My private security team did not use excessive force, but they certainly did not use the white glove treatment either. They moved with the efficiency of machines removing a virus from a hard drive. Kyle was the first to lose his composure. The man who had spent his entire life coasting on his father's last name began to scream about lawsuits and connections. He shouted that he knew the mayor. He shouted that this was kidnapping. But the guard holding his left arm simply tightened his grip, marching him past the stunned faces of the investors he had tried to impress just an hour ago. Kyle's feet scrambled against the polished marble floor, his expensive loafers squeaking in a pathetic rhythm of resistance. Jessica was less aggressive, but far more embarrassing. She had collapsed into a state of hysterical victimhood. She grabbed onto the velvet ropes of the VIP section, her fingernails digging into the fabric, wailing that she was innocent. She screamed that she didn't know anything, that she was just a supportive family member. She looked at the press, her mascara streaming down her face in black rivers, begging them to stop filming. But they didn't stop. They zoomed in. Zoomed. They captured the ruin of her social status in 4K resolution. And then there was Dante, my husband. The man I had vowed to love in sickness and in health, the man who had repaid my loyalty with isolation and cruelty. He wasn't screaming, he wasn't fighting, he was dead weight. His legs had given out beneath him, and the guards were essentially dragging him by his armpits. His head hung low, his chin resting on his chest. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. As they passed me, he lifted his head one last time. His eyes met mine. There was no anger left in them, only a terrifying, empty realization of what he had done. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to whisper my name, but I turned my back before the sound could leave his throat. I did not watch them leave the ballroom. I did not need to. I heard the heavy double doors slam shut, sealing their fate and my freedom in the same motion. Outside the hotel, the Atlanta sky had opened up with biblical fury. It was raining harder than it had in years, a deluge that washed the streets clean. The security team didn't walk them to the valet stand. They didn't call them a cab. They marched them out the side exit, the one used for trash disposal and deliveries, and shoved them out into the storm. Dante stumbled onto the wet pavement, his knees hitting a puddle of oil and rainwater. The cold shock must have hit him instantly. He gasped, wiping the water from his eyes, trying to stand up. Kyle and Jessica were already arguing, their voices shrill and panicked, blaming each other for the catastrophe. But Dante ignored them. He stood up shivering in his ruined tuxedo, the silk lapels soaking up the water like a sponge. He looked around. He had no phone. I had canceled his service 10 minutes ago. He had no wallet. He had no car keys. The leased vehicles would be repossessed by morning. He was stranded in the city he thought he ruled with absolutely nothing to his name. And then he looked up. Directly across the street from the hotel entrance was a massive digital billboard. It was usually rented for high-end jewelry or car advertisements, but tonight it had been rented by Vesta Holdings. Dante watched as the screen flickered. The advertisement for his failed clothing line disappeared. In its place, a new image resolved in high definition. It was a photo of me, not the cowering wife, not the secretary. It was the photo taken in Bangkok, the one where I looked like a queen. I was wearing the emerald jumpsuit, looking out over the city with a gaze of absolute sovereignty. The text beneath my image was simple, bold, and glowing in white letters against a black background. Aaliyah Williams, Chairwoman, Vesta Holdings International, defining the future of ethical luxury. Dante stood in the rainwater dripping from his nose, staring at the giant image of the woman he had thrown away. He watched as the image on the screen changed to a video clip. It was me walking into the Vesta headquarters, shaking hands with world leaders, signing real contracts. He saw the life I had built while he was playing video games. He saw the power I wielded while he was bullying me about laundry. He reached out a hand toward the screen, as if trying to touch the phantom of his past mistakes. He looked small. He looked insignificant. He was a speck of dirt in the shadow of the monument I had built. I didn't see this with my own eyes. I didn't need to stand in the rain to witness his misery. I saw it on the live feed playing on the tablet in the back seat of my car. My driver, a quiet man named Thomas, who had been on my payroll for years, closed the door of the Rolls-Royce Phantom, sealing out the noise of the storm. The interior was warm, smelling of leather and peace. I settled back into the seat, watching the rain streak against the tinted windows. I looked at the tablet one last time. I saw Dante slump against the brick wall of the alley, defeated. I reached out and turned the screen off. The show was over. He was no longer my concern. He was just a line item I had written off. This story was never about revenge. Revenge is a reaction. Revenge is emotional. This was about correction. It was about rebalancing the scales of the universe. Dante and his family believed that my value was defined by my utility to them. They thought that because I served them, I was beneath them. They mistook my silence for weakness and my patience for fear. They forgot that the person who builds the castle knows exactly where the structural beams are, and they know exactly which one to pull to bring the whole thing down. My phone buzzed. It was a secure line. I picked it up. "Hello, Madame Nguyen," I said. The voice on the other end was cackling with delight. "Did you see the news?" she asked. "The stock for your holding company just jumped 20%. The market loves a strong leader who cleans house." I smiled, looking at the city lights passing by. "The trash has been taken out, Madame," I said. "The warehouse is clear." "Good," she said, "because the real shipment just cleared customs. The grade A mulberry silk, the hand-woven brocade, the designs you drew 3 years ago. It is all here." I took a deep breath. This was the moment. The Emperor collection was a decoy. It was a trap designed to catch a rat. But the real collection, the one I had been dreaming of since I was a girl, was ready. "Rebranded," I said. "What is the new name?" she asked. I looked at my reflection in the window. I saw the scars of the last 5 years, but I also saw the fire that had cauterized them. "Call it the Phoenix," I said. "Because we rose from the ashes," she replied. "I like it. When do we start selling?" I looked at the time. It was midnight, a new day. "Right now," I said. "Put the inventory online. Alert the buyers. Let them know that Vesta Holdings is open for business. And Madam Yes Aaliyah, make sure a catalog is sent to the homeless shelter in downtown Atlanta. I have a feeling my ex-husband might need something warm to wear." I hung up the phone. The car turned onto the highway, speeding toward the private airfield where my jet was waiting. I wasn't going back to the house. I had already sold it to a developer who planned to tear it down. I was going to Paris, then to Milan, then to Tokyo. I had a company to run. I had an empire to expand, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have to ask anyone for permission to fly. I closed my eyes and let the motion of the car rock me. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was free, and that was worth more than all the silk in the world. This story serves as a powerful reminder that your value is never defined by how useful you are to someone else. For years, Dante viewed Aaliyah not as a partner, but as a utility. He saw her as a hard drive to store his memories, a processor to handle his paperwork, and a maid to clean up his messes. He made the fatal mistake of confusing her silence with submission. He believed that because she wasn't screaming, she wasn't plotting. But Aaliyah teaches us that the most dangerous person in the room is not the one shouting threats. It is the one quietly observing, documenting, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In a world that often labels women, especially Black women, as emotional or aggressive when they defend themselves, Aaliyah shows us the power of strategic silence. She didn't fight Dante with tears or arguments. She fought him with receipts, contracts, and the law. The ultimate lesson here is that you cannot build a kingdom on the back of someone you disrespect. If you treat the architect of your life like a servant, do not be surprised when she decides to pull the foundational beam and watch the roof collapse. True power does not come from controlling others. It comes from owning yourself, your assets, and your future. Aaliyah didn't just walk away from a bad marriage. She walked toward her own empire, proving that sometimes you have to let the old life burn to ash so the phoenix can finally rise. If you have ever felt underestimated by a partner who didn't see your true worth, or if you are currently plotting your own comeback story, hit that like button and share this video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about justice served cold. Tell us in the comments, have you ever had to remind someone exactly who you are? We want to hear your story.